Straight to breaking news from the US, the Supreme Court, that judgment around TikTok, it has just come in. Let me read you the one-line ruling that we have so far. The US Supreme Court rules against TikTok's challenge to that law that would force a sale or a ban applying in the United States, and that ban comes into effect on Sunday. They heard the representations from TikTok. We were waiting for that judgment. It has just come. So let's head to our North America correspondent, Nomia Iqbal, who's there in Washington. And Nomia, tell us more.
Yes, so it's not a surprising ruling. The US Supreme Court had indicated that it was likely to uphold this legislation. Now, it was signed by President Biden last year, and it was a bipartisan law. So it was as bipartisan as you can get when it comes to modern day Washington. And as you mentioned there, it will go into effect on Sunday. Now, just to sort of say, what does a ban mean? So if you have TikTok, it doesn't mean you're suddenly going to be arrested from Sunday if you're using it. If you already have TikTok as a user, and remember, there's 170 million people in this country who use TikTok, the app will not be available to you on these platforms like Apple and Google and so forth. So you won't be able to update it, or any of the kind of security updates. The app can get buggy and what have you. You won't be able to update it, and eventually, the view is that it probably could get killed off. If you haven't got TikTok, then it won't be available to you to download. And basically, the heart of the battle has been this whole argument about free speech and whether or not, this is TikTok's argument, this should be allowed. But lawmakers say this is about national security. Now, it's worth mentioning that President Biden has left it to Donald Trump's administration to implement this law. But Donald Trump, who was the first person to actually talk about wanting to ban TikTok, has now done a U-turn on it because it was very successful for him in the presidential campaign. And he has said that he wants to save TikTok. Exactly how he'll do that, we don't know.
Yes, and his national security advisor, or the incoming advisor, has already indicated that the president-elect is looking at ways perhaps around the ban. As you say, they were anticipating the Supreme Court would go this way. As you say, Donald Trump has flip-flopped. He supported a ban, then he used it so successfully in his re-election. He's even got the TikTok boss apparently invited to the inauguration on Monday. So do we know any of the details when those advisors and officials say he's looking at ways to work around this, how they would work around this?
Well, they've not given us any details yet. And yes, he does have the CEO of TikTok at his inauguration, which gives you a sense of, just how close he is with TikTok and wanting to save it. But in terms of how he does it, so could he repeal the law? Not really. It's really hard to do that because, as I mentioned, it was a bipartisan law. Could he potentially not enforce the law? So his incoming Attorney General, Pam Bondi, could he say to her, don't enforce the law, if it appears on these platforms and people still download it, just effectively allow the law to become redundant. The problem with that, I guess, would be that what he'd be saying to the people that own these platforms is that we won't enforce the law, and they would have to take his word for it, which might be quite difficult given that Donald Trump is a pretty mercurial person, and they would want guarantees that they weren't going to be fined in any way. But he has said that he wants to find ways to save it. Ultimately, what they want is to sell TikTok off to a US company. But TikTok has said that they won't do that. I mean, there's certainly a lot of buyers in the US. That wouldn't be a problem to sell it off. But TikTok has said that they do not want to do that. So that could be one of the options. But it's worth mentioning, Matthew, that this is hugely controversial. I remember last year there were lots of protests outside the White House when the law was signed, and spoke to a lot of content creators who said, it's not just an app where I go on and, watch music videos or have fun. For many, many Americans, it's where they have their businesses. It's their livelihood. It's how they make money. For a lot of young people, it's how they get their news. So it is something that is deeply cultural now in this country, and it's hugely controversial to even ban it, which is presumably why Donald Trump wants to try and save it.
Now, separately, although the president-elect is so involved in this story, and of course China is the backdrop to everything that we are talking about with TikTok, news in the last, 45 minutes that Donald Trump has had a phone call with President Xi. Tell me more about that.
He has, and he put out on his Truth Social media platform that they talked about a lot of things, including TikTok. The Chinese president, Xi Jinping, also spoke a while ago. He said that they both hoped for a positive start to Chinese-US relations during the new term. And both men placed great importance on interactions. They said that they want to promote greater progress in China-US relations. I mean, TikTok is definitely going to be one of those issues that they will be talking about. As I mentioned before, lawmakers, and many of them are Republicans who are very loyal to Donald Trump, want TikTok bans. They believe that China, because it owns the algorithm, it cannot be trusted, that it's a national security issue. They're using the app to spy on Americans, that also they're using it to promote Chinese propaganda. There's no hard evidence that's been shown regarding that, but that is the concern. Let me also add that Donald Trump has invited Xi Jinping to his inauguration. I don't think he's taken up that invite, but I understand that he will be sending an envoy instead to the inauguration. So they will, as I say, TikTok will be one of those big issues that I'm sure that they will talk about. Exactly how Donald Trump plans to resolve it, we just don't know yet.
Nomia Iqbal there in Washington. Thanks for that instant analysis.